Welcome to the High Bar.
Great job.
Did you write that down on a piece of paper?
Your weekly watering hole for lighthearted conversation with people who care about culture that matters. I'm Warren Etheredge, your host and barkeep. I promise never to cut anyone off while encouraging all to think responsibly.
It's just like you have to really listen.
Josie, good question. You know, but that kind of was. That's a good question.
Today, join me at the fabulous Lobby Bar in Seattle, Washington, as I welcome private detective turned author Sam Brower to raise a toast to and raise the bar for child protection. You have written easily the most disturbing book I've read this year. Every time, I thought, oh, it's bad. It gets a little bit worse, and that is part of your point. Actually, is to
that was
to
the
obsess.
idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the idea.
And this is something that obviously has consumed a great deal of your life. When you first got into this case, investigating the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or FLDS as we'll refer to it,
All right.
did you realize what you're getting yourself into? Did you know?
I had no idea. I had moved from California to Utah. I didn't even think there was such thing as polygamous. My business partner had said to me when I moved, "You're going to Utah? They have polygamists there." And I said, "No, they don't, Gene. There's no such thing as polygamous anymore." And sure enough, I get to Utah and walk into the supermarket, and there's 4 or 5 women that are pregnant and have little kids trailing behind them and wearing these long dresses that are kind of reminiscent of burqas or something like that. And sure enough, they did have polygamists in Utah.
But polygamy, in my mind, by the end, seems like the least of the offenses, really.
Yeah.
And seems crazy to begin with.
Yeah, but polygamy is the least. I mean, I kind of just describe it sort of like prohibition. It's not taking a drink that's so bad. It's all the ancillary crimes that go along with it to cover it up or facilitate it that are bad.
And what we're talking about with the FLDS that you cover in your book, Prophets Pray, is really what goes so terribly wrong in this one little pocket of extreme Mormonism. But it is important to note that for people who don't get it, that there's a big divide between the FLDS and the LDS, right?
There's a big divide, yeah.
Can you put that like FLDS is to LDS as the Third Reich is to?
Let's see. The Third Reich is to, I guess, maybe a normal German citizen. I don't know. That's pretty hard. You know, it really, there are a lot of parallels between the Third Reich and the FLDS, especially the FLDS leadership. I kind of compare it to the FLDS is to, it's similar with, you know, there's Catholics and there's Lutherans. Lutherans decided they were going to break away from the Catholic Church and start doing their own thing. And they're 2 separate religions now. The only difference with that comparison is that when the FLDS broke away from the LDS Church, they decided that they were not going to obey the law, which is what the LDS Church was doing, and that they were going to hide out and live this lifestyle that was above man's laws. They were going to obey God's laws, and they started regressing from there and going horribly wrong from there.
Really, really wrong.
Really, really wrong, yeah.
I mean, one of the things that comes up, though, is that while they the FLDS drapes itself in the First Amendment and freedom of religion, would you consider it fair to call it a religion, or is it more a cult now?
Oh, it's definitely a cult. Yeah, they have regressed to the point where their only tenet, you know, their central tenet and only tenet of their religion is polygamy. Everything revolves around that now, and they everything they do is in support of that one central tenet. So they're a cult. They believe that it's okay to commit crimes to further that one central tenet. They'll lie about it. They'll cheat. They'll steal. They'll do anything. They'll do anything they're told.
And why is that one so important? Because for those of us who've actually been in relationships, maintaining one marriage is tough enough. Why, like Warren Jeffs, 80 of them?
Yeah, 80, over 80. And the only thing I can think of is it's just a cultural thing. You know, maybe it's wives, or maybe it's, I don't know, something else, worshiping Ra, the sun god, or whatever. And in some religions, maybe they think it's okay to throw the virgin in the volcano, but with the FLDS, it's regressed to a point where, if you're obedient, maybe your wives start getting a little younger, or you start getting more wives. And then as the wives get younger, you break more crimes, and then you have to commit more crimes to cover it up, and it just keeps getting worse and worse.
What's intriguing to me is that Warren C. Jeffs, I have no relation, my name may be Warren, but no relation. Warren Jeffs, when you first read this thing and you hear about all the wives, maybe from a distance, you think like it's going to be like Hefner at the Playboy Grotto or something like that, but he's the antithesis of that.
Oh, yeah. He has his wives spread out to these different so-called places of refuge. They're all over the country. They're in Colorado, they're in New Mexico, Texas, and it's a control thing. It's a power thing with him. I don't know. Maybe it is with Hefner too. I don't know, but definitely is with him. And it's not just little girls. It's also little boys. One of the first cases I took was Brent Jeff's case, his nephew, who was raped by his Uncle Warren. And for him, it's about pushing the envelope and never being satisfied. There's always got to be something else left to do. And if there's not, he'll invent something that's even huger than the last time.
But what really throws me is that if we make the comparison to the Third Reich and you have Hitler or something and you watch the film footage of him, you see that Hitler in his own way was charismatic in some way, like, a dynamic speaker. And there's very little that the public has seen about Warren Jeffs, but you've had access to a lot of information. He's not that guy, though, is he?
No. In fact, hearing his voice is like, fingernails on a chalkboard to me now. He's very monotone, very uncharacteristic of what you would think some, powerful despot is. But what he is he has the ability, he found this hook in those people. He grew up in it, and he was his father's favorite son that could, at a very young age, start manipulating these people and sucking them in and knowing what would work. And really, from the time he was a young boy, he started figuring this out and taking steps to find his place and his niche in that religion. And it worked. He was quick on his feet. He was very kind of nerdy, very a gangly, backwards kid. But he was very potent in that culture.
It's sad to me because he does have my name, Warren. And if you actually go to the name lore, Warren, that Warren was the name given to the knight who stayed behind while the other knights went off to battle and was supposed to protect the women and children of the village. And he's gone the opposite way.
Well, according to him, he is that knight. But you're right, he has gone the opposite way. I mean, women and children are chattel to him. In that culture, it's turned to a point where, let's say you're a young man, and if you can somehow manage to distinguish yourself from amongst all the other young men there, maybe you'll get a wife. And if you can get a wife, then you can have children. If you can have children, you can have young men or young boys that can work for you, make more money, and then you can distinguish yourself a little bit more, and you'll have more wives. You can place girls with prominent people in the religion, and maybe get another wife. And that's what it is, women and children become their gold. They're as valuable as a truckload of gold.
Because the more you get, the better off you are.
Yeah,
right.
The more you get, the more you can get.
Right. You need 3 wives essentially to even be considered.
Yeah. If you don't have 3 wives, you're still a lower class citizen. So the goal is to get more than 3 wives. And for instance, Warren with 87, he's the king. He's got the 87 wives.
What's amazing is that you were able to talk to and work with people who actually escaped in one sense or another, or wanted some justice within that system. But it seems like such a small number of folks who have tried to do that. How do they keep such good control without, killing folks?
Well, a lot of people have talked about it being them being brainwashed, but it goes way beyond brainwashed. They're indoctrinated from birth. They really know no other way. It goes way, way beyond brainwashing. It's cultural. When a child is born, they're taught from those very young ages that this is how you act. This is what you do. If you're a girl, you don't play with dolls. You start taking care of babies. If you're a boy, you don't go out and ride bicycles and play with toys. You start working. And that's how it is in that culture. There was a time when Warren Jeffs he was in jail in Washington County, Utah, after he'd been arrested there. And he had what I call a lucid moment. And one of his brothers came to visit him in jail. And this visit was recorded by the jail. And he was telling his brother that I'm not a prophet. I never was a prophet. And he actually told him I'm a liar and the truth is not in me. And his brother, while he was telling him this, kept saying, no, this is just a test. This is just a test. He wouldn't accept it. And the more Warren would tell him, he'd say, no, I haven't held priesthood since I was 22 years old. I've had immoral relations with a sister and daughter. And the brother would just not believe it. He'd say, no, this is just a test. This is just a test. And when the guards took Warren away, the brother just buried his face in his hands and sobbed. He just couldn't accept it. And that's how it is there. They don't want to accept it. Their heads are buried in the sand. They don't watch TV. They don't listen to radio. They don't read magazines or newspapers. They have no contact with the outside world. So it goes way beyond brainwashing. It really is. Warren found that perfect storm and took advantage of it in that culture.
Right, when you can control all the outside media, that really helps. But the other thing is they don't educate the kids at all. The kids are essentially at least undereducated. Can we say that fairly?
Undereducated, some hardly educated. The children boys, for instance, are given enough education to learn how to read a tape measure and get by reading and doing a little bit of arithmetic, and they're out on a job. 8 years old, they're out on jobs. I mean, I've seen kids on huge track hose running them, out on construction jobs.
Why doesn't that run into child labor laws?
It does. It does run into child labor laws. They just don't do anything about it.
But it seems like all of these things seem like such egregious offenses. And I understand like the corruption of the local police or something, but that there's no larger organization that just wants to go in there and say, you are violating, law after law after law.
Yeah.
Forget the polygamy.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
The child abuse, the child labor laws, the failing to meet homeschooling standards, any of those things.
Just recently, an FBI agent testified in Texas, and he said that the FLDS is how do you put it, a group or, no, he called it, he said they're a criminal organization that is set up to evade paying taxes. That would, you and I would be handcuffed and taken to jail for evading taxes. Right. But for some reason, it's ignored there. And maybe it's the religious aspect of it. Maybe it's because there's just so many of them and it's so expensive. I don't know exactly what the answer is. I've just been going around trying to make people aware of it. At one point, there was a huge federal raid that was going to take place out there, and it was suddenly canceled. It was in the final stages of the operation. And a memo came down saying, apologize to your magistrate judges, we're pulling the warrants, and this operation is canceled. Nobody knows why. It just said it came from the highest levels in D.C. So it's a problem that everybody, it seems like, would just as soon not get their hands dirty. To Texas's credit, they prosecuted these guys. Little Mojave County, Arizona, prosecuted 8 guys. Washington County, Utah, prosecuted Warren Jeffs. But it's going to take more than these little counties in the state. It's going to really take the resources of the federal government to go in and break up this city, this whole culture of 10, 15,000 people that have all the resources of any other city.
Well, that's what's so distressing is that you get through the book and like all you want reading the book is justice.
That's good. I'm so glad to hear that.
It's like I'm trying to get it. Come on. So yeah, you get 8 indictments down in Texas, 8 indictments in Arizona, but it still and you get Warren Jeffs in Utah, but it still feels like
There's
that's
lots of
nothing.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the tax thing, and you cite like there's one of the Arizona judges who says this is a taxpayer emergency, and it started to make me think of Al Capone, and how we got him on the money, really.
Yeah.
And it just feels like the government can't go after this. I mean, it's not like it's a corporation.
No.
so we should be able to go after them.
I agree. We should be, and in fact, that operation, the IRS was involved in that. And you would think, you hear all these stories about, well, if the IRS comes after you, that's it. But they bailed. Right. I don't know why. I don't have the answer. I just know that. Well, when I started this, 8 years ago. I never ever thought that 8 years later I would still be saying something has to be done about this, and hoping that people would be as shocked and appalled as I was when I started finding out about this. And that's my hope when people read the book, that they'll be shocked and appalled and reach that same level of disgust that I reached and when I said, okay, I can't turn my back on this anymore, And maybe the government will get there, I hope.
8 years. You're a good-sized man. You look like you can take care of yourself. You're a bail bondsman and a bounty hunter and a private investigator. But you never got to the point where like this. I can't imagine doing all this work and not wanting to punch somebody out at some point.
Oh yeah, it's I've had all those fantasies, but that would kind of ruin my professionalism, I guess. People have asked me throughout the course of my investigation, what's the most shocking thing that you've uncovered? And I would say that the most shocking thing is when Warren Jeffs was arrested, there was an audio recording found in his car, and he kept it there as a trophy. It was the rape of this 12-year-old little girl. And that recording was taken to a judge in Utah, and Warren Jeffs was being tried there in Utah. And the judge would not let it be introduced as evidence because he said it was too inflammatory.
Yeah, we wouldn't want that in the courtroom.
Yeah. We wouldn't want the smoking gun in the court. And so afterwards, now you have to understand too, that the FLDS and Warren Jeffs have the best attorneys money can buy. I mean, these attorneys will do anything for money, and they have lots of money. And they took that tape, that recording, and took it to a federal judge, Judge D. Benson, and asked that he seal it. And he did, saying that it was protected religious material. The rape of a 12-year-old little girl is protected religious material. And the authorities in Texas tried to get that recording and couldn't because it was sealed, and they were finally able to obtain a copy of it, and then they dug into this whole truckload of evidence. I mean, a semi-load full of evidence, and were able to find it, and finally, 5 years after the fact, present it in trial against Warren Jeffs. And that is the most shocking thing that I've found in the course of my investigation. It should never take 5 years for the rape of a 12-year-old and 24-year-old little girl to come to the light of day. That's shocking and that's disturbing.
And so why do you think that is, though? I mean, that's, for the conspiracy theorists out there, maybe there's something, but I just have a hard time accepting it's the ignorance of our, justice system.
I think as somebody who has been in the justice system for a long time, I think that it works a lot better for people that have a lot of money and have really good attorneys, and that's part of it. That Warren Jeffs has unscrupulous attorneys that will do whatever it takes to make a name for themselves and get their client off, and that certainly has a lot to do with it. I also think that the government has the ability to overcome that. I mean, Texas did overcome it. It's a matter of how dedicated they are and how much they want to overcome it. And there's this problem of dealing with religions. There's a problem of, okay, if we get involved in this, is there going to be another Waco? Is there going to be another Jonestown? How is this going to backfire in our face? And if they don't do anything, then they don't have to worry about it backfiring in their face.
Right.
I mean, I have a tendency to disagree with that. I think there's a possibility that there may be some backfiring coming shortly here, actually. But that's their thinking anyway. And there's the FLDS always bring up the constitutional issues associated with religion because that's all they've got. I mean, they can't deny what they've done. They rape little girls. They take little girls and pawn them off to old lechers. And so all they can do is try and claim some kind of religious defense,
But you say that Texas did a good job and they did a better job, I suppose. But even in that case, the famous case where initially they pulled 463 kids out, only get 8 indictments out of that, and most of the kids wind up going back.
Yeah.
And not even to their parents, but to essentially anybody who can make their mark with an X or something.
Yeah. It was, of course, in Texas, there's different agencies that fall under the auspices of different government leaders and so forth. And CPS started getting involved in the children end of it. And right off the top, the bill shot up to $13 million. And that was, they'll never say this, but that's a lot of money. And they had to start figuring a way to get out from underneath it. The projections were it was going to cost $1 billion to run these kids through the system. And they didn't want to deal with it. The easiest thing for them to do is start non-suiting them and returning them back to the abusers. And that's what they did.
One of the key elements is that it seems like there's a little to be done about the polygamy issue, because that's the marriages aren't even legal, and leave that alone. A lot has to do with just the child abuse. But curiously, in this country, the ages for consensual sex vary wildly. What is the right age for people to start having sex?
I guess if you have to pick a number, 18 seems reasonable, Definitely, anything with a teen behind it is suspect. That just doesn't sound good.
Because it remains 14 in Hawaii and Idaho.
Well, it was 14 in Texas.
At the time,
Yeah.
Which makes the case tougher.
And it still makes it tougher, actually. One of their defenses now is that, this is a new law, so have some mercy on our client. This is a new law.
Right. Like sort of grandfather us in for that.
So it continues to be a problem. I think most states now are 18. There are a few that aren't, but those are old, archaic laws that definitely need to be changed.
If I can do just one thing, if viewers could do one thing to help you in this cause, not only will they pick up a copy of Prophet's Prey, but like me, they'll read it, and then they'll get really, 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 really angry. They'll celebrate your writing, but then get really, really angry. What do they do? What should we do?
Writing senators, congressmen, and so forth would be great, especially right now because Warren Jeffs has just sent out his predictions and his revelations to all the senators and congressmen and the president and everyone else, all the other heads of state of not only America but foreign countries as well. That may help get them to take it seriously. And one thing I think that would really help would be to start prosecuting the women in that culture, not just the men, but the women are the ones who really raise these girls up. Naomi Jeffs was with Warren Jeffs when he was arrested. And that's good for 10 years on a federal charge. And she was with him when these girls were married to him. And she's the one who took them and trained them and told them how to behave and have marital relations with Warren Jeffs and so forth. They need to be prosecuted right along with the men. They're just as culpable, maybe even more so, because they are the trainers. And if society would tell the politicians, go get these women. They need to go to jail too. I think that would go further than anything to putting the brakes on what's going on out there and start to break it up.
That may break up the largest case of systemic child abuse in the country.
It may, yeah.
It may. Well, if that happens, it'll be in large part due to the 8 years of work you've done on this case, and I thank you so much for that. It means a lot to me
thank you.
for personal reasons, but just anybody could look at this and recognize the amorality, and I appreciate all the work you've done. Thank you, Sam Brown.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. When the people who tell us they're going to save souls instead rape and ravage them, something is going wrong. And it seems like time to remember what Paul Johnson wrote in his book, Intellectuals. We must at all times remember what intellectuals habitually forget, that people matter more than concepts and must come first. The worst of all despotisms is the heartless tyranny of ideas, religious status or not. Cheers.